What is going on, my people? I am back. Hope you all are having a wonderful day. And for today's video, I want to talk about bipolar disorder. Now, the reason I want to make this video is because I've mentioned in past videos that I am bipolar, and I was diagnosed with it at an early age. And it seems like, from the best that I can tell, most people don't really understand what all being bipolar encompasses. And me, myself, I've never really understood it either. And what really brought making this video to my attention was because a little while ago, I was editing the Zoloft overdose video. And of course, if you haven't watched that already, I recommend you do that. But during that video, I had mentioned about Zoloft not doing shit for me. And so once I got done editing it, I went ahead and did some research on it. Because all my life I've known, okay, I was diagnosed with this, but I never really understood what all it was about. I just assumed it's like a different form of depression. And truthfully it is, but there's a lot more to it. That's why you're diagnosed with that and not just a regular case of clinical depression. And so while I was doing this research, I pulled out an index card and I started writing some of this down, because there's really, quite frankly, a lot to talk about. And, my short-term memory isn't that great, so trying to remember all of that to then go and record this, I'm going to forget about half of the shit and or get it wrong, therefore making this video null and void. So the unfortunate part about bipolar disorder is the fact that there is no cure for it. And because there is no cure, it is a lifelong condition that you deal with. And fortunately, with the advancements in the medical field and science over the last 20-30 years, the medications and treatment options that are available to help cope with it have gotten better. Now, bipolar disorder, it affects your daily life, it affects your relationships, it affects your work and school ethic, and being bipolar can also put you at a greater risk for substance abuse. These first two things really kind of caught my attention. So the first one I want to kind of touch on is relationships. I originally had made a video about this, and I was going to edit it and I was going to post it. But then ultimately I decided not to, because it's something I just don't really want to talk about. I mean, I do, but I don't. You know what I mean? But just to kind of paraphrase a little bit of what I talked about in that video, pretty much, well, actually every relationship I've ever been in has ended because of me. And I'm not talking about me being the one who wanted to end the relationship. It was always me doing something stupid or something I didn't mean to do, and therefore the relationship would be over. And, after learning about this, it makes a little more sense now. Because when I'm in a relationship, I try to do the best that I can. But unfortunately, I always screw up at some point or another. And I want to give a little bit of an example. So back spring break of 2019, I was with a girl, and things were going good. I was staying at a buddy's for the time because me and my parents were not getting along whatsoever, and my stepdad really didn't want me around that much at all. So I was staying with my buddy, she was coming over, staying with me bits and pieces of time, and it was just having a good time. But one of the things we often did was we would go to Walmart. Even if we weren't there to get anything, we would just walk around to walk around. Because really, the county that we were living in, really there ain't a whole lot to do. So really the only things there are to do is either go to Walmart and just fuck around, or, go to the park there in town and walk the trails. Other than that, really all you've got to do is just go to the ball court or drive the fuck around. And so, we're all at Walmart having a blast, and then, she would just walk off. And really what it was usually she just had to go to the bathroom. But she wouldn't say anything, and that always bothered the fuck out of me. So usually by the time we're done, or, she's coming back to me and we're continuing to walk around, I'm usually not in a good mood. And it's not like I mean to be upset about it, it just aggravates me. Well, then this particular night, and I'm going to try to not give too much detail just because the legal ramifications of it and the fact that I'm still on probation because of it. But basically this particular night, sometimes I get claustrophobic, especially if I start getting really fucking hot. So, I'm laying in bed up against the wall, and my buddy's over to the other end of the bed, and because he's small, there's a good amount of room between us. And my girlfriend was laying on top of me. And, we were trying to go to sleep, but I was burning the fuck up. And I didn't want to say anything to her because, I was enjoying being with her and I enjoyed being able to spend time with her. So it wasn't like I wanted to say, just get the fuck off of me, because that's rude and that's not a good thing to say. And so then at this point, my claustrophobia starts kicking in and I'm starting to tweak out a little bit. So finally, I squeeze my way out from under her and I get up. And in all honesty, I should have listened to her because I was starting to get my shoes on. I asked my buddy if he wanted to go to Walmart with me. And of course, he was down. And honestly, I was too, because I just wanted to get up and stretch and, just get a breath of fresh air. But she was telling me, just come back to bed. And I should have fucking listened. Because had I have listened, I wouldn't have gotten arrested that next night. And then everything just fall apart from there. So we end up going to Walmart, and just to keep it short, we steal some things. Of course, it got caught on camera, obviously. And the next night we had went back and we were gonna buy some things, but I didn't have money, so we ended up not being able to buy it. And as we're leaving and meander our way out of the parking lot, there's a unmarked trailblazer right behind us, and we get lit up, and I got arrested. Then we ended up breaking up, and really wasn't a fun time from there. But I never really thought of it at face value until now, realizing that my bipolar disorder was the reason why. And I think a lot of it was because at that time, I wasn't on Xanax. Alright, and I'm going to kind of get to that. And I talked about that in my drug history timeline video. But either way, so the other part I wanted to talk about was the greater risk for substance abuse. And really, I don't know if being bipolar contributed to me getting into drugs or not. Because like I've said, I'm the type of person that even if I get quote unquote addicted to something, if I tell myself, I don't want to do this anymore, or I shouldn't do this anymore, I can quit. But the fact of me being bipolar and the fact that it can put you at a greater risk for substance abuse, it kind of makes sense why whenever I was in a situation where I was offered some type of drug, I was more likely to accept it and try it. Now, there are several different types of treatment for it. And one form of it is mood stabilizers. And I guess I should really kind of talk about this. When I'm talking about manic episodes and things like that, basically it's the polar opposite of depression. Because depression is an emotional low, and being manic or hypomanic is where you're at an emotional high. And typically, for the majority of BPD affected persons, common symptoms of it are you may feel like you have sudden bursts of energy. You may feel like you don't need sleep. And there's a couple other things. I didn't really jot all of it down. I just kind of covered some of the key things that I deal with. Because sometimes I'll just randomly feel like I've got a lot of energy. And sometimes I'll feel like, I can go several days without sleeping. And sometimes that happens, but it's pretty rare. But then there's also some other aspects of having manic episodes. And, I've had some of this happen before, but I didn't think it was linked to it. And now I'm like, fuck, this makes sense. because through the different sites I was looking at and listening to people talk about it, things like impulsive purchases can be an effect of having a manic episode. And I want to get something clear here, okay? I understand the fundamentals of money and how it's the most important fucking thing on this world. You can't live without it. But from time to time, I really fucking struggle to save my money. And like I say, it's not really like I mean to just go and buy things. Unfortunately, I don't like just buy random bullshit I don't need. Typically when I end up getting something, it's at least something I need or can really make use of. But at the same time, it's not like I absolutely have to have it, like it's a necessity type of thing. So this really, it's all starting to come together. It really makes sense. And now we're going to talk about the polar opposite of a manic episode. And really, depression is obviously something that a lot of people know about. They may not understand it necessarily, but they know the concept of it. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't know how to deal with someone who is depressed. Now, even though, and I've said it before, I'm not good at helping people, but when I can understand what someone's going through, or I've went through the same thing as them, it's a lot easier for me to try and do what I can to help that person. Now, when you're going through depression, the most common things is a lack of enjoyment out of anything that you would normally enjoy. And this one really stuck with me when I read this, because I believe in the motivation episode of my YouTube creative series, I was talking about how sometimes when I'm going to record gameplay stuff for these videos, sometimes I'll just sit there and I can look at every game I have, and then I get to a point where just nothing is interesting me, and I just start staring a hole through my fucking TV. I didn't realize that that's a symptom of depression. Like, all I figured was it's just me getting burnt out on doing this. But actually, it's a symptom of depression. Now, obviously, some of the more well-known symptoms of it is a lack of appetite, which is something I struggle with quite a bit. When I was living in a situation where I was around my friends a lot and stuff, I was eating at most once a day. And it wasn't affecting me negatively, but I was losing weight, and I was getting down to a weight where I wanted to be. But then I've had to move, and that's not been very fun for me. And even though my eating habits not changed, I'm gaining weight again. So that just kind of is irritating, but oh well. And of course, there's the elephant in the room, which is attempts of suicide and suicidal thoughts. And this is something that it's really hard for me to talk about, because I've attempted suicide more times than I can count with all of my fingers and honestly all of my toes. I've tried hanging myself, I've tried overdosing, and even though I hate drowning, one time I tried to fucking drown myself. And to start off, a lot of these suicide attempts were just because of how fucking bad I was getting bullied at school. And I was always told that snitches get stitches. And so I was afraid if I told anyone, I would get my ass beat. And of course, because I was a very unhealthy kid, I didn't know how to fight. So if somebody wanted to beat my ass, they probably would have gotten away with it. Now, obviously, as I had gotten older and, my figure was starting to get better, if a fight was required, then I could knock someone's block back. But, once I got to my high school years, the bullying had faded away pretty quickly, but then it turned into my depression from being bipolar. I would get so depressed that I wanted to end it because I couldn't deal with it. And of course, when I was dating this girl for the last half of my senior year, and then I graduated and shit went down and we broke up, I was doing a lot of self-harm, and I had attempted suicide several times because of that. And since then, I've only attempted like probably just 2 times, but maybe 3 at the most. I can't really remember because honestly, like since I've graduated and me and Hannah broke up, honestly, most of my life since then has just been a blur. Because for over 2 years after breaking up with her, I was fucking broken. And when you're broken inside, you have no direction. And, I mentioned about self-harm. And really, most of my self-harm phases really was only through high school and occasionally here and there after high school. I know some people, they'll fucking burn themselves and shit. It was just not really something I did. Really, when it came to self-harm, really all it was just cutting. And I'm not proud to say that I've done that. I'm not proud to say that I've attempted suicide. But it's my past. That's the whole reason I make these storytime videos. Because most of all this stuff I talk about, I've either told only one person or nobody at all. And so in a lot of ways, doing YouTube, making these videos, it's a way for me to vent, if that makes sense. Because there was only one girl that, I trusted my life with, and I trusted telling everything to. And obviously, some of these videos that I've made, and some videos that will be coming out after this, some of it I've not told her. A lot of it was because at the time when we were dating, I couldn't remember some of this. And some of the things that I could remember, it just wasn't the right time yet. Now, obviously, if we were to get back together, then yeah, obviously I can tell her about a lot of this if she doesn't end up seeing these videos. Of course, that's no guarantee she won't. But the reason that I attempted suicide and was harming myself, it was because talking to someone about what's bothering me to make me depressed, it never really helps me. Like, there's only a few people, and by a few, I literally mean a few, that I can sit down and talk to about whatever is bothering me, and I feel, better. Even if I don't stop feeling depressed, at least I don't feel as depressed as I was before telling that person about it. Pretty much any time I start crying or bawling, there's only one person I really talk to about it. Because when I was younger, there was some people that I felt I could trust, and when something was bothering me, I would tell them about it, and they would turn around and use it against me. And that happened a fair few times during my high school years too. And because of that, I lost trust. Like, in order for me to trust you, you have to fucking show it. I can't just, be friends with you and, yeah, I trust you with my fucking life. It just doesn't work that way. I wish it did, but I've been hurt so much in my past that, I have to, quote unquote, have these defenses up before I can really open up to someone, even if it's just like a guy friend. And of course, I've got my group of guy friends that I do trust, obviously, but there's some things that I personally just don't want to talk to them about because I either feel uncomfortable or I'm just afraid of the repercussions if I do talk about it. That's like when I talk about these different drugs I've done. A part of me is afraid of what people will think of me knowing that I've done this or that or that or that even. But at the same time, I feel like it's a lot better to just talk about it and be done with it than to just continue to hide it, I guess. Now, another thing that comes with being bipolar is when you get angry, you get fucking angry. I'm the type of person that when things anger me, I just brush it off, and what happens is I just keep bottling it up and bottling it up and bottling it up. And then what ends up happening is something will happen that angers me, and then it fucking flips a switch, and then I go the fuck off. And typically, when I reach that amount of anger, normally what happens is something will get thrown. And 9 times out of 10 when it happens, I happen to be holding my phone. And so then I will proceed to get in the stance of a pitcher for a Major League Baseball team, and I will proceed to fastball chuck my phone at something. And typically, growing up, I played baseball, and I always had a pretty strong fucking arm. And so, despite having an OtterBox on it, once it's thrown and it hits a wall or whatever, sometimes the ground, it shatters into about 75,000 pieces, and then I no longer have a phone. And sometimes if I'm angry, but like, I don't want to be fucking stupid, sometimes I'll just, like if I'm in my room, I'll just fucking sit there and just pound at my bed until I've gotten my frustration out, and then I feel better. And so up until now, I never really understood why I would react the way I did whenever I finally reached my peak of anger. Now, there's one certain type of anger that I don't for 1 second ever regret. And this would be any time that I find out that someone hurt my ex or screwed my ex over. It would light a fire in me that I've never felt before. And a good example, there was one night I was working at this unnamed retail chain in Indiana. As I was going on my lunch break, my ex had called me, and we were talking, and at the time, me and her really were just acquaintances, so to speak, because we weren't really supposed to be talking to each other, at least in her family's eyes. And so us talking was a pretty rare occurrence. So usually the only times we would ever talk is when she was wondering how I was doing, or if something was bothering her. And as usual for my lunch break, because I had a half hour, I would go out to the Jeep and I'd throw a dip in, or if I had a vape, I would vape, and just, enjoy that time. But either way, so, we're talking, and she's telling me about how there's a guy who is giving her a hard time. And I don't want to say any details about it, because if I start talking about it, for one, it's going to get edited out anyway, because it's really just between me and her. But also, it is going to make me as mad as I got when she was telling me about this. And so she's telling me, and I don't know if I started doing it before she actually hung up, or if we had hung up and then I started doing it. But I remember just fucking rearing my right arm back, and I started pounding the top of my fucking steering wheel as hard as I fucking could. I was hitting it so hard that not only was it cutting my knuckles open and my knuckles were bleeding, but it also warped the fucking top half of my fucking steering wheel. I'm not an aggressive person towards anyone. Like, the last thing I ever want to do is have to fight someone. But the only time I would ever consider fucking knocking someone's head off, and obviously I would get in a lot of trouble for it, but guess what? I would rather get in trouble protecting the person I love than to just stand back and not get in trouble, but watch the person I love get hurt in some way or another. So with all of that being said, we can now talk about the next type of medication that can be used, and that is antidepressants. Now, as I've mentioned, when I was originally diagnosed, I was put on Zoloft. Now, Zoloft is an antidepressant, but after doing this research, I found out that Zoloft really shouldn't be the only medication that gets used to help deal with bipolar disorder. And really, after going through and editing the Zoloft overdose video and how I was talking about how it didn't do shit for me, it makes complete sense. I really should have been put on an antipsychosis medication as well. Now, I suppose in their defense, when they originally diagnosed me with it, I wasn't really exhibiting any, manic episodes really. And there are some people that their bipolar disorder is really only just depression. And you may occasionally have a manic episode, but it pales in comparison to the emotional lows that you'll have. And so, I imagine if the Zoloft was helping my depressive side better, all the times I was getting bullied and stuff, and like that day when I got bullied when we was doing the fucking pacer test in gym, then I may have never ended up, leaving school early and fucking taking almost a dozen pills of Zoloft. But after some time had passed, I had eventually got switched over to Xanax. And Xanax is another antidepressant. Now, Xanax is a lot stronger than Zoloft. And, obviously it was helping better with the whole purpose of it. But Xannies are also habit forming. Your body can build up a tolerance to it if you have to take it regularly. And furthermore, if you ever have to stop taking Xanax, you're supposed to, consult your doctor and all that shit, and then they're supposed to wean you off, slowly dropping your dosage of it. Because if you just quit cold turkey, it can have a lot of negative effects. Now, for various reasons, since I had graduated, from time to time, I would stop getting prescribed it. Either because I didn't have a doctor, so I couldn't get my prescription signed to be refilled, or some other bullshit would happen and I wouldn't be able to get my refill. And honestly, I know pretty damn good and well that my body finally had built up a tolerance to it. Because anytime I would get taken off of my Xanax medication, I wouldn't feel any withdrawal symptoms. And furthermore, I wouldn't really notice a difference in how depressed I get, whether I was on the shit or off the shit. The other kind of sad thing about bipolar disorder is it's not exactly something that's hereditarian, but it can be passed down pretty easily. And, through doing this research, I found out that the chance of being bipolar is greatly increased if your parent has it. And again, it's no guarantee, but your chance of becoming bipolar is much greatly increased if your parent has it before, you're born. And so what worries me is if I ever have kids again, and I say again because I'm going to talk about that when I talk about Elena, which is going to be a fucking interesting video to talk about. But if I ever have kids again, I'm afraid that they could get it too. And obviously, I'm going to do the right thing as a parent, and I'm going to have them, examined on a regular basis like you're supposed to do, and have them tested just to make sure that the whole thing is, obviously there's no cure and it's a lifelong thing, but the sooner you get diagnosed for it and get on some form of treatment for it, it's going to make your life so much better. If you end up having it very, very early on in your life and you don't get diagnosed till later, it's going to be a lot harder. I was lucky that I got diagnosed pretty early on, but through statistics, most people, they don't get diagnosed until they're in their late teens, early 20s. And of course, if you, get diagnosed then, but you've had it, 10 years prior or so, that doesn't mean you're automatically screwed. It just means it may be harder for treatment options to help you deal with it. And it's rare, but in some cases, people that get diagnosed late and then get put on treatment plans for it, sometimes they can have a bad reaction to it. And very rarely, they may start to go a little cuckoo. Although there's only ever been a couple reported cases as far as I've been able to tell. And in school, unfortunately, there's a lot of fucking bullies. And the whole bullying thing doesn't get taken fucking seriously. And so people who already deal with depression, getting bullied just makes it worse. A lot of people end up successfully committing suicide because of it. And even though a part of me still doesn't really believe it, there's obviously a reason that I'm still here, despite all the attempts I've made in my past to no longer live. It's hard for me to tell anyone who is depressed and is thinking of suicide not to do it, because of the fact that majority of the time when I get depressed, suicide is something I think of. But you have to try and find something. Now obviously if you're blessed enough to have a person that you love and you get to be with, they should obviously be, the number one thing that helps you. Because at least when you're depressed, if you have someone that you get to call yours and you get to tell everything to, and you share an emotional connection with, there's something comforting about just being next to them, just holding them, getting to hear their voice. You've just gotta find something. But that is gonna wrap this video up. I know I was a lot more open about me and my personality than I probably ever will be. But honestly, it's kind of relieving in a way. Like now knowing all of these things could be explained by the fact that I'm bipolar. I'm not saying that, okay, everything's okay now because of it, but there's just some sense of closure, I guess, being able to explain a reason why I do some of the things I do. But either way, I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, drop a like. And if you're not yet subscribed, you're always welcome to. And until next time, I will see you all in the next video.